The last waning moments of March 22nd, 1995. The Dakota Bar and Grill, St. Paul, Minneapolis. And Joe Lovano, it's a pleasure to meet you and talk with you.
Thank you, Leigh. It's really been a great 2 nights here, and really enjoyed meeting you in these evenings.
Symbiosis, would you describe the concept?
Well, it's an ensemble that brings together a lot of different elements throughout the history in jazz, and as well as different elements of sounds. This particular formation that we played here with these last 2 nights featured Anthony Cox and Ed Schuler on basses, Eric Friedlander on cello, Judy Silvano, soprano voice, Bob Meyer on drums, and I played tenor saxophone, soprano saxophone, alto clarinet, and percussion. And we're trying to put together some different sounds and explore the possibilities of the personalities on stage, as well as dealing with some classic music from the history of jazz.
Speaking to the issue of instrumentation, which you described, you might just touch on the mission and concept of each member and how you think about it anyway, from the tonight's format, which was 2 bass, cello, and you on the woodwinds, and Judy Silvano voice, and of course percussion. That's a remarkable kind of environment musically, beyond the dreams of the modern jazz quartet and chamber music, and totally a different direction.
Well, there's a lot of sounds up there and a lot of possibilities, and we really try to play together as an orchestra, but yet in a free way where within the structure of each piece, we're trying, to orchestrate as we go along. So we create backgrounds for people, and we play themes sometimes that become backgrounds later for soloists to play off of. There's a lot of different themes and variations that happen on each tune, And with the concept of voice within the ensemble is really incredible, man. Judy has an amazing instrument and a beautiful imagination, and we've been playing together really since the early 80s, doing a lot of concerts around New York City with dance and different things, outside of just the jazz repertoire, really in some real creative situations, and started to play in a group of mine called Universal Language, I guess around 1986, which we recorded for Blue Note Records. I think the record was released in 92 or 93. That's a sextet with piano, bass, and drums, trumpet, soprano voice, and woodwinds. And that group was in a way more, had more of the sound of a jazz sextet, with trumpet, voice, and saxophone. And Judy's role in that group was to play more like a lead trumpet part. Where in this group, with the strings, I'm playing different woodwinds, and the basses with no piano or guitar or anything. There's a different kind of sounds happen, and she has the ability to change her attitude and her range to fit in with all these different tones, and it really humanizes the sound of the band for me, and I really love working with the voice, Something very different, I never experienced in my days like playing with big bands or standard jazz quartets or quintets with just trumpet and saxophone in the front line. As soon as you add the voice part, it turned the whole thing into another world of music,
It certainly is a contrasting color as you improvise through the night.
Yeah, and when I switch horns, the thing I love about it too, when I play tenor with the voice, there's a certain quality that happens. As soon as I switch to soprano saxophone and voice, there's another thing that happens, you know. When I go to the alto clarinet in a voice, she adjusts a certain way to each sound, you know, and it's just amazing. So whatever horn I pick up, there's a different kind of a blend and a different attitude that happens within the band, you know. And Eric also plays in that same way on cello. When we're playing different horns and doing different things, his ideas and tone changes right with the different instruments. So I'm free to switch horns and change the sound of the band completely when I switch the horn, you know. And that's what I really love too.
You'd mentioned earlier something about history, and I'm curious about music materials. It could be Ellington out there, or it could be something fresh and new like Flying Colors, and it just runs the gamut. What in tradition attracts you as you build the repertoire of this organization?
Well, you know, I want to try to be an honest musician, you know, and play directly from my history and from the music that I've played and studied my whole life, you know. The music of Ellington, music of Charles Mingus, of Thelonious Monk. These are the things that I grew up learning, you know, the music of Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker. I feel that's really my foundation, and there's so much music there. I feel I'm just starting to learn some of their music, you know, and learn about not only about it, but how to play with a certain interpretation of their music that makes it my music. You know what I mean? Not to copy the way Ben Webster played on Chelsea Bridge or Prelude to a Kiss, but to try to use those tunes and knowing the versions, the very beautiful versions of the history in jazz, knowing those versions and trying to live up to them, you know, and try to be expressive in my own way, you know. My writing has developed from my playing in some great bands with under the direction of Woody Herman and Bob Brookmeyer, Mel Lewis, Carla Bley. I've played in some great big bands, you know, and I was really fortunate to play like maybe in some of the last great big bands with some great leaders, you know, from, you know, of course I played with Woody in 1976 to 79. You know, and it was during his 40th anniversary year, and I had a chance to play in the section next to Stan Getz playing Early Autumn, you know, at a concert at Carnegie Hall that was recorded for RCA, you know, Woody's 40th anniversary concert. And I mean, that changed my life, man. I was 23 years old, and playing in a section supporting the beautiful Stan Getz, you know. Man, it changed the way I practiced. And it also developed my confidence and my desire to try to find my own sound, you know. So in writing my own pieces, I'm trying to write for the ensemble I'm playing with, for everybody's interpretations to come through. And it has developed from my experience playing in some great bands, you know. I'm really proud of that.
It's 1995, and you've really begun to take it beyond the laboratory stage, and you're getting a sense of the way the audience assimilates what you're programming. And what do you sense about it at this point?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm thrilled. You know, I feel like everywhere we play, and that the audience is really curious about how we're going to sound. Just from the instrumentation, they see in the paper 2 basses, cello, voice, saxophone, percussion, drums, you know, like, what's this going to sound like? And everybody comes like with this very curious thing. And we play such a wide range of music and tunes, and we play from really free form playing to swing and bebop type things, and the reaction of the crowd has been incredible, you know, and the generations is what I'm really thrilled about, because we're getting like a lot of young folks and a lot of older folks that have heard some great players in their life. You know, we're getting young people that have never heard anybody play. I'm playing for audiences that never sat and listened to Dexter Gordon play a tune. You know, and I don't know. And then I'm also playing for some people who heard Dexter and heard Stan Getz and heard Dizzy and heard all those people, and I'm getting equally beautiful response from both those kind of folks, you know, and it feels really good, you know. It feels like we're doing something right, you know. But more than that, though, I feel like the ensemble, when you orchestrate on stage and you play that freely and everyone's listening to each other and we're creating this music, it brings the audience into it because they feel like they're a part of something, you know. I know for me, the first time I heard Miles Davis play live, he had Jack DeJohnette in his band and Keith Jarrett, and it was 1971 or something, you know, and it was kind of a real heavy electric kind of sounding band, but they played like that. They played completely free, and Miles was directing the band, and they just improvised all this incredible music. And in the audience, I felt like it was such a special night, man. I never forgot it, you know. I want to have a band like that. I want to have a band and play every night and draw the audience in like that and make them feel like they were a part of something that was very creative and happened that night, you know. And my recordings actually also have this feeling. My recording Rush Hour with the great Gunther Schuller did all the orchestrations. We played live in the studio, and it was a real performance on each piece, you know. And I'm just really proud of that aspect of that recording, because it was large ensembles with strings and woodwinds, brass, voice, percussion, and rhythm section, you know. That performance quality is really important for me.
Joe Lovano, what really, in your background, stimulated and set your eye and your ear on this career and these objectives that you're talking about?
Well, it really comes from my father. My dad's was a beautiful saxophone player around the Cleveland, Ohio area. His name was Tony Lovano, and he was born in 1925 and grew up in the bebop heyday, the swing period. He heard Lester Young play live. He heard Miles Davis and Charlie Parker play together with Max Roach on drums, came through Cleveland. He played opposite Stan Getz and opposite a lot of great bands with his own groups, you know. And when I was a kid, just hearing him play around the house and practice and hear that tone made me want to try to get that sound myself, you know. I mean, I used to sneak in his room and play his horn, you know. Like I played alto when I was a kid until I was about 12 or so, and then I got a tenor. But those last couple years before I had a tenor, I was like sneaking in his room during the day and taking his horn and trying it, you know. And he knew I was playing it, you know, so he finally got me my own tenor. You know? But he was definitely my main inspiration, hearing him play a lot. And then when I was a teenager, 13, 14, he started bringing me with him to jam sessions and to rehearsals and gigs. And I heard him rehearse with big bands and quartets and organ trios. And I was studying all the tunes that I heard him play. And that was my whole life when I was a kid.
So you literally got it by osmosis in every other way?
In a certain way, yeah. Yeah.
When you landed on, say, Woody Herman's band, especially that 40th anniversary project that was assembled by Leonard Feather and Woody for that night, and you found yourself in that reed section with those notables moving in and out, what were you thinking?
It was incredible. I was so nervous, man. Because at that point, I had been on the road and toured with mostly small groups and organ groups. Brother Jack McDuff, I toured with him 1975. Lonnie Smith, great organ player, was living in Detroit. I toured with him 74 and 75. And then I went to New York in 76 with Lonnie, you know. So most of the gigs I had done up until that time in my, you know, when I was 19, between 19 and 23, was all small group playing and organ groups and really traveling on a Chitlin circuit through the States and playing some real groove things, you know. And I hadn't played in that many big bands. And when I got the gig with Woody's band, I was in New York and was recommended by a great saxophone player, Joe Romano, who played with Woody in the 60s with Sal Nestico. And also Joe played with Buddy Rich's band. He played with all the bands. Great, beautiful musician. Lives on the West Coast, you know. And we had played together, and they had called him to do this tour for the 40th anniversary. And he didn't really have eyes to do it. And he recommended me, you know, and they called me out of blue. They didn't know who I was. I flew to St. Louis and joined the band in May, or in August, excuse me. I moved to New York in May of 76. In August, I got the gig with Woody and flew to St. Louis. My first gig was out in a parking lot, you know, with the wind blowing, and I was like, scared, you know. I was trying to read all this music. We're playing Four Brothers and Early Autumn and all these famous pieces. Luckily, I had known and studied when I was a kid. My father taught me Early Autumn. He taught me Four Brothers. Of course, I had to play some inner parts, but I knew the tune. I knew the rhythms, you know, and the whole piece, you know. So I just stood up and played. My music was blowing all over the place. I couldn't, you know. I thought Woody was going to fire me, you know. But Woody was a great leader, man, and he was the kind of guy who you know, he realized, like, this was not an exercise to learn how fast you could play the part, you know. He'd let you learn your parts, but he listened to you play, you know. And that first night, I played some stop choruses. We played Caledonia, you know, and it was real fast blues, and there were these stop time choruses for me in my chair that Sal Nestico really made famous, you know, in the 60s. So the whole band would stop and I would play, you know. And I knew from that moment on, after I played that night, and I played that blues, you know, and I played the time and brought the band back in, that it was my chair, you know. And when we did that concert, it was in November. And it was amazing, man. Flip Phillips was there. Al Cohn, Zoot Sims, Jimmy Giuffre, Stan Getz.
Carnegie Hall.
Carnegie Hall, you know. I was terrified, you know. And we played all the parts. The band played the parts, and the great soloists played the solos. But Woody featured me on 3 different tunes in the band set. And like I mentioned before, playing Early Autumn at the microphone with Stan Getz. And, you know, I had my part memorized. That was the highlight for me, you know. And through the years, hanging out with Stan at different times after that was really great, man, you know. I had a chance to play with Al Cohn a bunch of times, just sitting in with him in his groups. So it really, it gave me a strong foundation to develop myself, for sure, just from that one night, you know.
You'd won the approval of the coach, as they called him.
Well, I was real proud of that. It was great. Yeah, Woody was something else, man. He was a fabulous, fabulous cat, you know. And we played through here, St. Paul and Minneapolis, a bunch of times.
Joe Lovano, thanks so very much for taking time after the engagement here at the Dakota Bar and Grill. It's really a pleasure to meet you, and good luck in all that you're doing.
Thank you, Leigh. It was my pleasure.